So I'm hoping that everybody enjoys this one as much as they've enjoyed the others. I've had a fantastic time listening to everyone speaking. So I'm going to just basically kick straight off. A little bit about me. My current job title is VP of Growth at Mirador Local. And I'm kind of quite well known as being an SEO geek. I think my job title on business cards for a long time was SEO geek. So I'm quite proud of the fact that I get very nerdy about everything from data through to technical, through to anything and everything. I've got a real passion for this sort of thing. Bit of background to this talk. I basically decided to do this talk because of the fact that I often look at websites and find things that are wrong with them. And every time I look at them, it seems to be some fun kind of challenge to go, what can I possibly find that's wrong with this? And so I look at all the different weird things that get neglected. It's not just things on the website, but things around the website. Mirador Local, just a bit of background, is a tool which allows you to manage Google Business Places, now called GBP, used to be called GMB, but I'll talk about that in a bit. But that's basically what Mirador Local is. And if you want to know more about it, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for me, Jerry White, and hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions offline. Okay, what we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about 8 different things, but it'll be from crawling, presentation, opportunities, user experience, security and data, and hopefully it'll all be fun. I've got a few anecdotes and a few bits and pieces along the way. Hopefully it'll be fun, entertaining, and I'm hoping that you'll ask some great questions at the end of it all. Okay, I'm going to start off with some of the really core basics. I think everybody knows about it, but one of the things that I find hilarious is the fact it's never maintained. The Robotstxt file. I mean, I look across at websites all the time, and I often find that that not index count, which you find in Google Search Console, often gets crazily high. And often the reason that it's crazily high is that there are hundreds of small problems on the website where Google will find links and interesting bits that it kind of goes, oh, I'm just going to go crawling around here and finding bits here and doing all sorts of stuff here. Even with redirects, even with everything, that not indexed kind of creeps up ridiculously high. The other problem is that on a large website, you often find that it'll only crawl like 2,000 pages per day. And that sounds like a lot, but a lot of the time it's going back to what it already looked at. So it's returning to a lot of the pages that it's already looked at, the assets, the files, the PDFs, the images, the CSS, the JavaScript, all of it needs to be looked at. So it's not 2,000 pages, it's 2,000 requests. So that is really, really, really critical. All the Robotstxt file does, or basically all it does, is it tells you where search engines aren't allowed to go. It tells you what search engines really shouldn't look at. Now, I should mention that Google have kind of changed their mind on whether or not it's a directive to whether it's a hint. So more recently, Google has said that, you know, they'll kind of reserve the right to ignore it. But I would say treat it more as a directive. Treat it more as something which, if you have it in your Robotstxt file, then it probably won't be seen by Google. So my favorite example, I was the SEO director for a Norwegian supermarket for a year. Interestingly, I couldn't speak a word of Norwegian, but I did learn some random things, mainly around fish, mainly around white pizza and various other strange things that Norwegians like to eat. But my role was predominantly on the technical side of it and growing them into Finland and into Germany. But one of the things that I would look at, for instance, was the Robotstxt file, and we would find this line in here, which was like /recipes/print. And why was this line put there, or why did we put there? Because we had a lot of recipe pages. I think we had something like 2,000-3,000 recipes towards the end of it. We had a lot of great recipes, really high quality. They drive a lot of great traffic. And I think it was really important for us to make sure that all of these recipes were crawled and all of this content was properly presented back to users whenever they search for I'm not going to try and pronounce that. I'm not going to pronounce it. But basically, anytime somebody tried to find a particular recipe, it was important that we came up because they worked really well because we sold the ingredients for those. And it was a great way for us to kind of create new users. So it was really important for us to have this. But, yep, there we go, 3,390 recipes. So But what we did have was we had a print version, so anybody could print out a recipe relatively easily. It's kind of important that people would be able to have this print version. I mean, there are alternatives. We could have had different methods, but in Norway, we discovered that a lot of people were printing them, so we made sure that this worked really, really effectively and really, really simply. And we made sure that people could print them and use them offline, because that was the way people would do it in kitchens, particularly a couple of years ago. And so, yeah, we didn't want those particular files to be crawled all the time, because that number of pages would double or even triple if you allowed it to crawl the print version, because there was multilingual print versions, and we had other sort of versions of it where we could increase the number of like the number of people you were serving for. So there was a real issue that if we let search engines, crawl the recipe print version, it would go crazy. Now, Google does say don't use your robots.txt file to kind of hide web pages and PDFs and similar bits and pieces, because Google will still kind of index these. In fact, when it finds the links, it will kind of try and find out as much about it exclusively from those links. So although I say it's not there, you see all these print versions are actually already there in Google's index. And, you know, there's 835 results. So it doesn't sound like this has been exactly effective, but the crawl budget, the amount of time that Google's crawling all of these, isn't dedicated to these versions. They're actually crawling the non-print versions, the original versions. So this is basically why the robots.txt file is so good. And if I look in Systrix, you don't see any print URLs ranking in there. So although Google knows that those pages exist, it's not ranking them, it's not sending traffic to them, and it's sending traffic to the right pages, and it's visiting and crawling the right pages. So that is basically the robots.txt file. You shouldn't, one of the common mistakes that I've seen people do is they block old URLs after migration. So they do a big migration and they block off the old pages to stop Google recrawling them and visiting them, because they want the new pages to be found and crawled much quicker. But Google needs to see those 301 redirects to know that they're now actually 301 redirects, to understand the new redirects, to understand the new website. So it's really important to allow Google to see the old URLs that have now either gone, even if they're 404, or if they're 410, if they're 301, whatever you're trying to do, make sure Google can see that. It's also important to not block tracking parameters. Now, that sounds strange because that's kind of a duplicate version of the pages, but what happens is we see a lot of inbound links from great websites where they've just copied the same URL from, maybe they clicked on it on a paid campaign, they clicked on it on a social campaign, they took that URL and then they linked to it. And this means that you're actually blocking some really high value inbound links. So don't block tracking parameters. The other thing that people do is they block JavaScript and CSS. And this, again, it seems like a good idea because, you know, you really just want pages indexed. But the JavaScript, the CSS, this shows Google that it's a mobile optimized website. And when Google looks at websites, it wants it to look at and see that it's got a good user experience. It wants to see that all of the key parts of the website are good. And especially don't block images, which I've seen quite a few times recently as well. The other thing is that you must make sure that your robots.txt file is maintained. If you've done a platform change, don't block old URLs, don't block old bits, don't try to hide anything, because otherwise Google won't understand the kind of the layout of the new site. So it is really, really important to make sure that your robots.txt file is actually as simple and as clean as possible. The other thing that is a big challenge is faceted navigation. I've seen a lot of people block everything in faceted navigation, which of course blocks any sort of inbound links, or they block nothing, and that can then lead to literally millions of compounded URLs. Faceted navigation is where you can say you want to have white shirts, so you get to the shirts page and then you choose a color, so it's white shirts, and then you choose a size, so it's extra large white shirts. And even just 2 or 3 different parameters can compound and make absolutely millions of URLs. And if you don't block off all the sort of compounded versions, then you can basically present to Google tens of millions of almost infinite number of URLs, which becomes a spider trap. So I think it's absolutely important that you understand how much of the faceted navigation should be shown to Google or search engines and how much should be blocked off. If your dev site has been crawled, it's a bit too late. You really shouldn't have allowed Google to kind of crawl your dev site. And if this happens, don't use Robotstxt to block it off, because it still remembers what it looks like and will still try to crawl it a little, or not crawl it, but it will still try to bring back the page. If somebody searches for something and it can't find it on the live site and it knows it was on the old dev site, but it's blocked off by Robotstxt, it can often bring it back up again. So use HTTP authentication or block by IP. There are many ways to kind of hide your dev site, but just a Robotstxt file is not a good idea. Number 2, the XML sitemap. Again, same type of thing. Everybody knows about it, but everyone seems to neglect it. I check so many sitemaps, and I do it quite extensively, and it's relatively simple for me to kind of look through it and go, oh, that shouldn't be in there. Oh, that's interesting. They've got a lot of things in there that just don't work. I use tools like Screaming Frog to check through. I use all sorts of different ways to really look at what's in the sitemap that maybe shouldn't be in the sitemap, or alternatively, what should be in the sitemap but currently isn't. It's used for the same problem. If you've got hundreds of not indexed pages and you want to increase the number of indexed pages, this is basically a list telling Google where to go. And it's really, truly that simple. But it does also have some extra opportunities. I don't see very many people taking advantage of this. You can put into XML sitemaps images and videos. And if you want to really get extra traffic, people love great images and people love great videos. So make sure the great multimedia that put into the website is used to kind of present your website in the best possible way, because that will increase click-through rate, especially if you're talking about products, if you're talking about recipes, whatever you're talking about. If it's an image-rich opportunity, make sure those images are highlighted into Google itself. The other side of it is hreflang. Hreflang is really easy to do in an XML sitemap. I say that hreflang is sometimes the most ridiculously overcomplicated thing, but the core basics of it in theory are quite simple. You can say to it, we've got a website in one country like Denmark, and this is the Norwegian version, and this is the Lithuanian version, and this is the Finnish version. It's language first, so it's not really around the different locations, it's more around language. But it is important to make sure that you've got all of the information as done quite rightly. Now, we're currently looking at a website at the moment where they have exactly this issue. They find that the wrong website is ranking in the wrong country for the wrong thing, because they've got similar pages, similar blog posts, similar kind of content. And one of the things they said was, why is this version ranking when people come into it and try and call us, they're calling the wrong country, and it's hard work. And we said, yep, we can do it with hreflang, but to do it on your website is complicated. We can produce a static hreflang sitemap to do like in maybe a day or two, and then we can fix it properly. I always think that people neglect these things. They kind of do a quick fix, and then a year or so later, it's all not working because everything's a bit of a mess. So if you do it right. So what is an XML sitemap? It's pages to crawl, it's video images, and it's hreflang. You can use, if you want to create a demo XML sitemap for your developers, because most CMSs should be able to produce one out of the box, but in reality, a lot of things are custom built. A lot of the time, e-commerce websites, everything is a little bit custom. So you can actually ask ChatGPT to create one. And it's really, really easy for it to kind of create all the different templated parts of it. And I've checked it out, and it does it really, really well. So when I'm creating tickets for developers, I often use things like ChatGPT to make sure that I've got all of the core information done right. And it does it a really great way. It's not always perfect, so make sure you test it, make sure you validate it, because I asked ChatGPT some basic questions about SEO yesterday, actually, and it got a lot of things quite wrong, which is worrying because some people are using ChatGPT for medical information, and my knowledge of SEO is pretty good. My knowledge of medical stuff is pretty terrible, so I'm assuming that the medical stuff is equally as bad. So, yep, simply put, a URL, you've got video title, you've got a photo title, you've got hreflang alternative, and that's as simple as it gets. But you can do it at scale relatively simply, and that is a quick win for so many websites out there. Core rules for sitemaps. The canonical URL, I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but basically it shouldn't have dashes and slashes, and HTTPS it should always be the same protocol as your kind of core canonical URL. I have found so many times when I've audited sitemaps that the dashes are often a different type of dash or a different type of space to the canonical or the internal linking. So suddenly you've got 3 or 4 copies of a web page. This causes crawl issues. So it actually reduces the effectiveness of a site crawl rather than improves it. Normally, I would say that all of the pages should have a 200 turn, so no 404s or 301s or 50x's, and it really, really, really should be up to date. So although you can produce a static sitemap, that is not a good long-term solution. And one of my previous employers, they were producing an XML sitemap using Screaming Frog regularly, but they haven't done it in about 9 months. And if I look at it now, I can see clearly that it's very, very much out of date. And I say no 404s, 301s, and 50x's, but that's a rule that I do actually break quite frequently. In fact, I had a conversation with a developer who was shocked by my advice that I said that they should have all of the old 301s and 302s in it because of the fact that we wanted Google to recrawl those URLs much, much quicker to consolidate the pages and stop some of the issues where traffic was landing on old pages instead of new pages, and we were having all sorts of flux, and it basically improved ranking. So I do sometimes break my own rules. As I say, you can audit it with OnCrawl, you can audit it with Screaming Frog, Sitebulb, and one of the things you can do is import it with Google Sheets. This only works for relatively small sitemaps. So if you've got a normal size sitemap, you can import it using Google Sheets. And that is a great way to kind of have a quick glance around how it's all in there. Again, cheeky one, you can actually use ChatGPT to tell you the formulas to do that and to make sure it works right. I'm getting incredibly lazy in my knowledge of how to do some of these things because I'll open up ChatGPT, ask it what the formula should be, paste it in there, fiddle it a bit, and it works perfectly. RSS. So RSS is kind of an interesting one. RSS is something which we used to love a lot. Now, RSS is very similar to an XML feed, so I'm going to kind of blast through this one. It is very neglected. We used to love it. It seems to have lost popularity. And I would question why we've kind of lost our love of it. Is it mainly because of Twitter? I'm still not going to call it X, but Twitter seems to have replaced a lot of the way in which I discover what the great content out there is. People share great content. Google used to love RSS as well. In fact, they had this iGoogle page, which they brought out in 2009. But like a lot of things from Google, 4 years later, they killed it. And iGoogle was retired in 2013, which is now 11 years ago, which is kind of making me feel really old because it used to be something I used to know and love. So Google kind of had this thing where they would bring it into your homepage. It used to work really effectively. But since then, I feel like RSS has gradually been declining in popularity. However, you can use it quite a lot to do things like feed to social networks or feed it to newsletters. You can also use it to, a lot of people use content syndication to kind of use RSS readers to subscribe to content, particularly for more niche audiences. If you've got a website that has a niche audience, if you've got a feed of great content that people would be particularly interested in, RSS is still a very good solution. There is still, as you see, an extension by Google, which is the RSS subscription extension for Chrome, and that's been used by over 700,000 users, and it's got some interesting reviews. In fact, as I say, because it's so neglected, a lot of reviews for that are kind of complaining about the fact that the RSS feed is no longer working. I often find that when I look at RSS feeds, which is hidden in blogs, in WordPress, it goes back to like a demo site or a marketing site or something similar rather than the true core canonical URL. And often I find the RSS link has been broken. It goes to a 404 page. And if the website's migrated, that link, that RSS feed, often isn't migrated to the new website or it changes URL. So anybody who's previously subscribed to you has suddenly been lost. Is it neglected? Like I say, I've seen the RSS feed Chrome plugin has got a lot of negative reviews because many websites, it's not working, click on it and it just doesn't work. And like I say, I've checked it myself and that happens a lot. You can embed an RSS feed into another part of a website. So if your website has a WordPress blog in one part and an e-commerce part in another part, you can use ChatGPT, of course, to write some code to embed this into it. You can use it using jQuery, or you can ask it to do it without jQuery. And I've done this a number of times where I've just included a small bit just to improve the crawling, the ranking, push it onto a footer, do anything you want to. If you've got a blog, you can pull it into another part of the website relatively easily. Now, in terms of the tracking and automation, you can use UTM parameters. So you put UTM parameters onto the RSS to see if it's actually being used. And you can use FeedBurner to see if anybody's actually bringing it up. Now, FeedBurner still works, so that's really, really cool. And again, I can use Google Sheets to basically bring the feed in using import feed, the URL of the RSS feed, and how to do it. Now, cheeky one here, you can also create a tweet link within your same sheet to say, I want to tweet this out. So I can share this actually afterwards, but basically I've got a sheet which allows me to import the RSS feed of Mirador Local, and then I can click a button to tweet any of the blog posts that we've got relatively quickly and easily, and it's just a cheeky way for me to kind of share content quicker and easier. FeedBurner, like I mentioned, that works incredibly well. What's worrying is the fact that politics.co.uk, which is still in my account, has changed the URL, so that no longer works. But what's interesting down here is you can see that there's podcasts as well. So you can create a podcast from audio files, video files, and similar. So I was, in fact, have I got the slide in? One of the things that I did do was I created a podcast with Cindy and Jono Alderson, which was really interesting. And when I tweeted it out, somebody said, is there a podcast feed link for this? And it surprised me because I didn't expect anybody to be asking for it quite so quickly. But we've published it Spotify and YouTube. But yep, we need to have an RSS feed. So RSS is not dead. That tweet was like 20 minutes ago. Next one. The manifest.json. Now, this is one which I am truly shocked at, as in it's always wrong if anybody does it. Disney Plus, good example. Actually, they've done it right, so I'm not going to bully them too much. But Disney Plus, if you go to the Disney Plus website, you'll find a little link at the top which says install, especially if you're on Chrome. And then you can basically install it onto your desktop and use it almost like an application on your desktop relatively easily, which for a Mac user is brilliant. I don't need to install anything. It works really well, and it's a beautiful experience. So here we go. You can see in the address bar, there's this kind of button up the top there that says install, and it works really, really effectively. So I click the button and I install it, and then from there, I've now got Disney installed. This is another example, Scoosh. Scoosh is my favorite application for compressing images. I spend a lot of my life just quickly compressing an image for a blog post or optimizing something or finding that the 2.5 megabyte image that somebody's given me for a particular website, I can kind of turn it around to like a 40 kilobyte image really quickly and easily using Scoosh. But what I can then do is if I click on that install button, it comes up with screenshots from it, which is quite cool. So it tells me, hey, would you like to install this? It tells me all about it and tells me what it can do. So that's really quite simple and quick. You have within it the name and presentation, the start URL, the theme color, the background color, the orientation, which is like whether it's portrait or landscape. That's mainly for mobile, by the way, not for desktop. And whether or not you want the minimal UI or all of it. And it has the icons and the protocols. So if it finds a link from an email, it can say, no, I want to open this up in the Disney Plus app. So it's really quite cool, all of the little exciting things that it can do. It will take some screenshots, like I mentioned before. That's the ones from Scoosh. These are the ones from Tinder, which I use as a demo quite repeatedly. I don't know why. And it'll also allow you to put UTM tracking into it. So you can put UTM tracking into the manifest file itself. This gives you the ability to click into it and see just how many people are actively using it. Again, this is the actual code version for Tinder, which you can see here has got the UTM source, it's got the background color, it's got the port orientation, as in it should be held up vertically rather than landscape, and it will kind of give you the description, all those other kind of core features. So yeah, the manifest file. This manifest file is something which I strongly believe you should be looking at on almost any and every website that people would want to install. If people are repeatedly going back to your website, if you've got a travel website, if you've got an application website, if you've got an e-commerce website, if people are going to be going back to you regularly, this manifest.json file is really important. It's part of something called progressive web apps. I'm not going to go into that too much because I've done so many talks on PWAs or progressive web apps, and I love them. I think they're so sort of brilliant, but they're kind of neglected in the industry at the moment a little bit because it's only works on Chrome, and there's some reasons why. Like I say, within the manifest.json, you have a name, a short name, icons, start URL, theme color, and various other bits. So, you click add to home screen on a mobile phone, and you can quickly add it to your home screen. One fun example that I use is called the fart machine. I have got a Bluetooth speaker, which I hid behind my children, and using this, I was able to play certain sound effects around them quite repeatedly. And yeah, I'm a terrible father. One of the examples which I've been using quite regularly is the fact that the Gatsby starter library, I find that a lot of websites use this particular framework quite frequently. And what I find when I'm looking at all of them is they haven't updated this particular file. So this is why I say this is a critical file to update and make sure that you find it right. Now, the way to find it is you just right click on any page in a website and go to DevTools and then go to Application, and there it is, Manifest. And it's got it all laid out, gives you all the information about it, and it tells you where the page is, and it tells you about all problems. So it's a great way to quickly audit what you can do with it. So really simple, but really powerful. It's a very simple file. You can create it relatively quickly. You have to deploy it in the right location, and it's a quick win. Basically, it will work really well. I'm going to blast through this, but browser config is almost exactly the same. It seems to be just for Edge and IE, but no one's used IE in a long time, but there are a lot of people out there using Edge browser. In fact, when I Googled that just to kind of check, it seemed like there was a lot of people, like 5% of people are actually using the Edge browser, and 2.8 more people are using Edge than Firefox, which was truly a surprise for me. I think Edge is a good browser, but I don't really use it because I think I've kind of sold my soul to Chrome completely. It's a quick win, so do it. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't. So, basically do it. The other one is favicon, of course. I mean, I'm not going to go into this too much again because I think everybody knows what a favicon is. I feel like this was one of the things that we were doing 25 years ago when we first found out about it, and it was cool. But create a favicon. It gets pulled into Google search results. It gets pulled everywhere. And I think it's really important. But again, it feels like something that we know that we should do it, but it does get neglected. And I often find that the icon that was used is often not updated in the rebrand. There's so many times where I look at these things and kind of go, but you need to update this. Same with the Apple Touch icon. In fact, I've just looked at a website a couple of days ago and found out they had all these lines in their code. And when I clicked into them to check whether they were there, all of the touch icons were missing. So it's something which people seem to half do, but they never maintain. And that's part of what I'm getting at with this kind of secret things in websites that seem to get neglected. So it's not like people aren't doing them, but it seems like they get removed, they disappear. And so it's really good fun for people to kind of make sure that they kind of keep up to date with it all. The other one that I think nobody ever does, or at least nobody seems to be doing as much as they should be, is assetlinks.json. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is only really if you've got an app. If you've got a website and an app, please do this because, well, it's really useful, and it stops me leaving a bad review for you in Play Store. All it does is, well, this is me basically sitting there. I'm booking a flight to, say, Norway, and I've booked it online because I find it much easier to use a computer. And then when I go to the airport, I log into the app, and there it is. There's my pass, which I've already checked in, done the online check-in, and there it is. I've got my boarding pass on my phone, and that should be really seamless, and that should be really easy. But it's surprising how many companies out there haven't made it as easy as it should be. I should be able to kind of then take off and head over. Now, if I log into the website and I use a password manager like, Google, Google will suggest to me a password like that. And there's no way I can remember that password just in case you're wondering, that is not actually my real password. Don't try and log into Norwegian with my password there. But that's basically how passwords kind of look nowadays. We don't use that kind of mother's surname, or we don't use the dog's last name, or dogs don't have last names. What am I talking about? My point is that we have complicated passwords for password security. We have unique passwords, so it is much more effective than ever before. But with the asset links.json, that means that the same username and password from your website gets carried over to your mobile phone. Particularly on Chrome, it works really, really effectively. It stores it for you. It uses kind of the password management, and it is really, really easy for me to then just make sure I can log straight in. So I find this to be make my life a lot easier. And I get incredibly frustrated when I discover that big airline companies haven't done it. And there I am at the airport trying to figure out, reset a password on in the terminal when the Wi-Fi is terrible and there's no coverage, and I'm frustrated and I'm angry. And when I finally manage to do it, the next thing I do is I go to, say, Virgin or whoever it is, I'm not blaming Virgin on this one, and I leave a really bad review for them saying, why don't you just do this one thing? Because it will make my life a lot easier, reduce the amount of friction. And when I'm traveling with business, friends, family, particularly my kids, it's not the easiest when I'm kind of rushing around. All it does is app linking, which basically says this is your website and this is your app, and links the two together. So it shares credentials between the two. It does actually do some other bits and pieces as well. So it does do deep linking. So deep linking is where when you click on a link, so if they send you an email and it says, should we send you to the website or should we send you to the app? That's where it's also stored as well. So it does do deep linking. Apple app site is the same thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think I've pretty much covered it. You can Google kind of like the information around it, but if people are on iPhones, then obviously it's the Apple App Site Association, which is hard to say after a couple of drinks. And it's exactly the same thing. This is the one I've looked at from Norwegian. What's fun is you can start to see kind of like their dev sites in various places. So, you know, if you ever want to know where somebody's got their dev sites, often it's in this file. You shouldn't do this, but I know people who kind of troll around dev sites to see what campaigns are coming up on their competitors and various other bits and pieces. I've never really found the need for it, but I know people that do that. Okay, next one, CSP. The CSP is another fun one and another one that gets incredibly neglected. It's this added layer of security. It means that, well, basically this is my bank, Halifax. I'm hoping there's nothing personally identifiable in here, but what I find interesting is that there is some file that's being blocked because it's violating the CSP for my bank. I'm curious why this file is trying to be loaded. Should it be loaded? What's happening? Now, what I normally find is that the things that are blocked are often their core analytics. So the core analytics are things like Google Analytics or whoever else it is. And I bet there's someone sitting there saying, our campaign didn't work particularly well. This didn't happen. Or why are we not getting all the tracking information back from these subsets of pages or this domain here? And if it's not in the CSP, it's not going to work. So yeah, the content security layer, it's to stop hackers. It's to stop people doing all of the dodgy things that people can do onto websites. There are a lot of ways in which people have been able to inject JavaScript into websites. One key example that was known a while back was one analytics company disappeared and somebody managed to register the same domain name that they used to use and found that they could insert JavaScript into thousands of websites quite quickly and easily. It was a bit terrifying when I saw that happening. But it means that with CSPs, you can start to say only certain files, only certain fingerprints, only certain aspects will kind of work on the site. So yeah, it stops cross-site scripting, data injection attacks, and far more. It's an added layer of security that enables web developers to control the resources. And of course, it's directives which allow for certain file types, such as scripts, style sheets, images, and more to be allowed. You sort of say where it comes from, the type of source, the style source, and the image source. So basically, you can say what can be loaded into the web page. And I know this sounds really simple, but it is one of those really weirdly complicated things that InfoSec people love to kind of make sure it's done right. And if you're doing some minor modifications to a website and you're changing a CDN or you're using a CDN or you're doing something, this can really trip up how your website performs. You can make it report violations, which means that if something is saying, oh, we're blocking something, you can actually send it to a reporting bit of software. If you want to know more about that, give me a shout. I'll tell you all of the tools that I've been used in the past. I used it more when I was migrating from HTTP to HTTPS because that reporting violation thing worked really well for that. And so we could do a lot of auditing very quickly with that. So yeah, that's basically what it does and what it's working on. And if you want to kind of have a look at the CSP, you can actually do it by right-clicking and inspecting a page and then looking at it in the network tab in Chrome. So clearly you can see here the CSP, which says what pages can come in and what URLs can't. So it's relatively simple, but complicated to get it right. Next one, Schema. I'm going to blast through this one because I'm sure everybody knows what Schema is, but one of the things I am finding is that it's incredibly neglected as well. I won't go too much into the definition, but it's basically a standardized vocabulary for structured data markup on web pages. It's kind of normally hidden away, and the only way to find it is if you know how to read the source code or use Google's tester tools. The key concepts is basically the types, the properties, and the rich snippets. So the types is like you say what it is. Is it a product? Is it a person? Is it an organization? And the property is basically saying where it is, when was it published, and what's the name of it. And the rich snippets is how it gets displayed back into Google. Now, Google loves rich snippets. Sorry, Google loves Schema at the moment because it makes their job a lot easier to fully understand websites. Good example here is like if we have a gas station, then we can ask it to create some schema. Yep, I'm using ChatGPT again. Here we go. JSON schema for a gas station, which is open 5 till 11 p.m. every day and is on Popular Street. And so, you know, it does that relatively quickly and easily. Now, I'm using ChatGPT to kind of create a template, but this isn't how I would recommend doing it. I'll go on to that why in a minute. But, you know, you can ask it to include the URL. So, you know, there we go. There's a website, oslopetrol.com. You can ask it to include a photo. You can ask it to include images. It will include all of the kind of core information into it that you think that should happen. And it is very, very powerful because it displays back into Google. Now, what's interesting is the ChatGPT version that I asked Google to kind of create didn't actually work in Google. I asked it to evaluate it and Google went, nope, I can't see anything here. So I actually asked ChatGPT why it didn't work. And of course it came back and said, oh, could be various reasons. Let me fix it for you. And so it fixed it for me and it works. Now, this means that you can have a local business marked up and presented back to Google. Now, rather than you doing it manually, if you've got a large business website, what you should probably be doing is kind of creating this sort of thing automatically. Interesting fact of the day, I kind of was looking at a John Lewis Ninja air fryer. Now, what's kind of interesting here is when I say that some big websites neglect it, John Lewis is one of the biggest retailers in the UK. But their schema actually says that the price is 0 and the availability has been discontinued. And it says this across every single product across the John Lewis website. So it is interesting that I say that these things do get neglected because it's hard to spot and hard to kind of manage and hard to maintain because it's kind of an invisible background. So if something breaks, it's hard to know unless you actually do monitor and kind of look into these things. GBP. This is Google Business Profiles. Now, Google Business Profiles used to be called Google Local Business Center, then it was called Google Places, and it was Google Plus Local. We all know what happened to Google Plus. It didn't last particularly long, and then it was called GMB or Google My Business, and now finally it's called Google Business Profiles. Google has a bad habit of renaming everything. I mean, random fact of the day, I wrote a book called Google Data Studio for Beginners with a friend of mine called Grant, and about a month or two later, Google then rebranded as Looker Studio, and so I've sold very, very few copies of my book. I also have a Stadia controller, but that's another story altogether. So Google Business Places, if you search for anything, my favorite search term is ramen at the moment, and if you search for a ramen, it'll come up with all the ramen places around you, which is kind of interesting because if you want to rank for a local business, you need to have a Google Business Place. And my favorite kind of really good example is this company called Suit Supply. They've done such a good job that I use them as my demo example. And they're not a client of Mirador Local. Unfortunately, I kind of chose not to use any of our clients because that seemed like a dangerous thing to do. And they do all of the things like they have great reviews and they reply to all the reviews. So this is off your website, but it is something which, if you neglect, you can see serious like negative consequences from. And there's FAQs on it, so people can ask questions like, do I need an appointment? What's the best suit to wear for an interview? And Suit Supply have replied back to all of them, and they've done a really good job. Now, what's kind of interesting is a lot of the websites that we look at, or a lot of the companies we look at, random people have answered because the companies haven't. So it's really, really important that you answer these questions before a random person says, no, the shop's closed, or yeah, why not pop in? You don't need an appointment, or you do need an appointment, or something similar. So it's important that you kind of maintain and monitor these. You can also add things like posts to these. So it's almost got a whole CRM thing. It's got a lot of things which I think a lot of companies out there are neglecting. And of course, if you've got a lot of locations, a lot of businesses, Mirador Local is a tool to help you manage that, but I'm definitely not going to be selling that now. If you want any more information, contact me later. So yeah, GBP, customer engagement, make sure you respond quickly to customer queries, reviews, feedback. Really demonstrate that you're an alive business, that your opening hours are correct. And if you get reviews, monitor them and reply to them. It's so critical that you do all these things, because if you don't, all that happens is, well, it just really looks bad on you. We've seen so many companies out there that aren't doing this, aren't replying to all the FAQs, aren't replying to the reviews. And the kind of the negative implications is huge. Keep all that information up to date, because if you don't, Google can even sometimes say that you're closed when you're open. We've seen this happen a lot, where even maliciously other people have said, oh, this company's closed, or it's moved, or something's happened, the opening hours are wrong. Take advantage of all the features like the posts, the Q&A, everything, to make sure that the relationship you have with your customers is completely valid. Okay, so that is basically all of it. There's a lot more, of course, but it's Robotstxt is where not to go. The XML sitemap, I feel, is underused. Every time I look at XML sitemaps, I often find that only half the pages are in it. Nobody ever puts video and images in it. RSS, that's a strange one. I never realized how popular it was still today until I started using it myself a little bit, and then I kind of realized a lot of other people were using it. The manifest JSON, I think that's the kind of key one that I think is really cool. PWAs, I think people should be using them far more than they are. The assets link, it means that I'm not going to be leaving you a negative review on your app because I can't log into your app when I'm on the move. CSP, so neglected. Schema information, I think that that's, again, really underused. And Google Business Profiles. Cool. Thank you so much. I think we've got time for questions. I'm going to load them up if I can figure out how. I'm going to order them by upvotes. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's start at the top. Do you recommend the SEO team having the ability to update Robotstxt files, or having the dev team? See, the biggest problem that I've found in a lot of companies is the fact that I know I want to update the Robotstxt file, but updating it can be a lot more challenging than it should be. I mean, it's a static file in theory. It's just a text file, but often it's far more challenging than it really should be. But critically, it should only really ever be updated like once every couple of months or so. It's very challenging for us to really bother finding, sort of updating it all the time, because it really doesn't need to be. So challenging question. I think it's important the SEO team have the ability to update it regularly, even if it has to be done for a dev team, and the dev team should be able to do it relatively simply. Thinking of some really good examples, when I was at Just Eat, it was a bit of a challenge to do it, and I was only allowed to do it like once a month. But many other places, it was almost impossible for us to do it because we didn't almost know where it lived, and finding out where it lived took longer than actually just doing like a quick bit of work. So hopefully that answers the question. But yeah, I think it's so important that everybody answers that. Okay, Simon. Yes, I do. It depends. God, every SEO question is, it depends. Simon, basically the kind of classic question is Google still finding those old pages, and is there links to those old pages? I'm actually working on a website at the moment, and I'm finding hundreds of old URLs because they've got a software 4 issue. And the reason I'm finding all of these old URLs is because they've still got loads of backlinks coming into them. In fact, looking at the history of this website, I can see it used to have a PHP pages, HTML, and so much more. So I think it is important, but one of the things I would say is that, a lot of people kind of look at the nth degree. So I wouldn't go to town on it. Just make sure that the core ones are done. So I would say if there's inbound links to them, do it. If not, don't stress it. Core Web Vitals. Core Web Vitals is a entire talk in itself. Core Web Vitals is one of those things that we were obsessing over for a while because Google said it was like the most important thing ever. And then Google turned around and said, it's not really that important. But I would say it's important for users. Now, I say this because I have personally experienced it where I have struggled with a website and I've kind of got to the point where I'm not going to buy from it. I'm trying not to name it, but it's a large brand in the UK, and basically, if you keep adding things to the supermarket, into the shopping cart, it starts to slow down, and the entire site slows down, and it's really challenging. There's a lot of core basics that you can do, but one of the things I would say is use Chrome. Use Chrome to look at how a website loads. There are so many features within Chrome that will allow you to fix that. And like, look at the oversized images, look at the oversized JavaScript files, look at the things that are slowing the website down. Chrome is this incredible tool that I think I could do an entire talk on for like 2 or 3 hours. But basically, Chrome in itself has got this toolkit built into it, which allows you to fix things. But the other side of it is go into Google Search Console and have a look at the Core Web Vitals that Google's saying there, because Google's got this crux data, the user data from thousands of users. So if you've got the data from thousands of users, use it, and then basically you can optimize it from there. There is a Data Studio or Looker Studio report which gives you insights into this, and so I think that there's kind of a lot more information there, but I would happily chat about this separately. Okay. The coming soon page. Yes. The question is, don't optimize your website for coming soon, though. I mean, when I've been working on a lot of websites, particularly for a growing supermarket, growing internationally, we had a page which was basically the coming soon website or coming soon page. And it was really, really important that this was optimized for the key terms that we wanted it for. We didn't want to optimize it for coming soon. We wanted to make sure it was a page which talked about the fact that something was coming. We talked about sort of key bits, and we even started to build out some core pages on it. So yeah, a coming soon page is definitely better to have than just having nothing. But think about what you want it to kind of rank for. What do you want it to kind of do? Do you want it to collect user data? Do you want it to collect like signups for people? Do you want people to be able to kind of leave their email address to be notified when it's done? So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. So don't neglect a coming soon page, but make sure it's kind of, done correctly. Okay. If I migrated my blog from a subdomain to a subdirectory, would you recommend to 301 or others? Yeah. So, okay. If you've got a lot of old content, it's a question of whether or not you should redirect it to where. Now, what I would say is that I have deleted huge amounts from a lot of blogs that I've worked on. There's a lot of people out there who kind of have this hatchet approach to blogs. I don't. I think that if a web page has no value and if it's lacks any kind of content, like it's maybe for an old competition or something similar, do 2 things. One, check if it's got inbound links. If it has, then maybe redirect it to a competition page that you've got, which is talking about all your new competitions. So you've got the inbound links coming into it. But if it's basically redundant, it's dead. I mean, good example is we had loads of web pages about terms and conditions on Just Eat at one point. For every kind of campaign that we did, we had a terms and conditions page, and we had hundreds of these. So I deleted all those. But anything that has value, anything that has inbound links, make sure you redirect those to a good place where possible. If you've got rid of the old article and because it was bad, but there's a place to redirect it to, fine. If you can't redirect it, then 410 it, which is like a 404, but it's more, we absolutely killed it. So it's beyond a 404. It's saying that it's definitely done. Okay, canonical URL. So the canonical URL is an interesting one. Basically, what I find is that this URL, say if you look at a website, if it's got UTM parameters, if it's got all sorts of fragments, if it's got all sorts of bits and pieces on the back of it, or if it's got parameters for filtering or sorting, you don't want Google to kind of use all of those 20 different variants of it. So Canonical is basically saying that this is the true URL that you want Google and users to land on, rather than the 20 variants of it. I think that canonical tags are something that's really helped shape the web to be a much, much better place. Hey, am I running out of time?
I'm back. If you want to answer to one last question, we have time. Okay. Then we're going to finish the day.
Okay, all right.
We need.
One last question then.
Choose the right one.
Oh, all right. Oh, actually, this is an interesting one. How do I do this one? Where do I do it? How do I do it? It's gone for some reason. There's someone who basically said, where is it? Oh, there we go. I need to click that first.
Yeah, if you want to just read it, you can.
Yeah, it's about ChatGPT. Should ChatGPT be blocked? Honestly, it's the best thing to do is to kind of constantly maintain the Robotstxt file. But what is kind of interesting is, should ChatGPT go into it? And now, I kind of don't think so normally. I think most websites should allow ChatGPT or whichever the next generation AI is to kind of look around your website as much as possible. But at the same time, I don't want the great content I've written to be rewritten and then repurposed and then fed onto my competitors. So that's kind of an interesting one in itself. I'd love to kind of go into town on that answer. But yeah, all right.
Yeah, done. That's it. Yeah, that was pretty intense. Lots of information. Thanks, Jerry. It was so great.
Thank you.
And I think the audience is pretty amazed with your expertise. So great. Do you want to say a final word? Obviously, on my side, thank you. Thanks in SEMG team's names. I think it was really, really interesting. A hell of a way to finish the day, to finish the event. Okay, so just so you know, as it's now finished, you're going to receive a feedback survey. So please tell us what you think about the events. If it was good, tell us. If it was bad, tell us. But I hope it was really, really helpful and interesting. When I saw the conference, I was pretty amazed with a lot of them. So I'm pretty sure you were interested in all of that also. If you want to share your experience on social medias, it can be on X, LinkedIn, on Instagram, do whatever you want. We want to make some noise. Of course, we love LinkedIn, we love X. But if you want to do a TikTok, go for it. Maybe it's not. Yeah, maybe you won't. Okay. You will receive the replay of each conference by the end of the week, maybe even today, but I think by the end of the week. So if you need, ask us. If you haven't received the replay, ask us. You can contact us on our website. You can contact me. You can do whatever you want. Go for it, but you will receive it by the end of the week. If you want to know more about the speakers, go to their LinkedIn pages, go to their websites. Those guys are pretty reachable, so go there. If you want to know more about SEMG, I would love to show you what we could do together. So go to our website, ask for a demo. It can be pre-customized, so it's pretty interesting. So go and ask for demos about different features. Same with Cherry. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to show what we have behind the company. It's not an event company. We are a SaaS platform, and we are an expertise company. So feel free to ask us if you want to know more. And I think that's it. I'm so sad it's already finished. There is a final word to conclude the day?
That was fantastic. I've been enjoying so many of these sessions. Eli was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think basically like the sessions that I've listened to. The Similar Web one was great. Crazy amount of bird noises in one of the sessions, and yeah, and the bad bird puns.
Let's finish like that. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks to my team, because it's a lot of work to put that in motion. So yeah, thanks everybody. Let's finish like that. I see some hearts in the chat. Yeah, that's great. See you soon. And let's see all of you in the next session of the SEO Square. See you soon, guys. Bye.